Hello, and welcome to this episode of Close Encounters. Today's main painting is Madonna by Edvard Munch, and she has a big secret that is to be revealed. Together with me, I have curator Vibeke Vollan Hansen and conservator Thierry Ford, and they're going to tell us more about this painting. Remember that you can ask questions in the comment section below that we'll answer after the talk. Over to you, Vibeke and Thierry.
Yes, well, welcome and thank you so much for joining us today. We've got an amazing treat here in this fabulous new studio that we have. We have Munch's Madonna that the National Museum owns, and both of us are really fortunate because we both work with this painting. You work as an art historian, so you also work with curating exhibitions, and also with the you're also responsible for the recreation of the new or the old Munch room in the new building.
Together with some colleagues.
Yeah, and my job is more sort of the well-being of the painting. So so we are so fortunate. But here she is in the studio, unframed, and we're going to have a real close look at her, and we're going to also take a journey beyond or beneath the surface and find some very interesting things. But that's not really just the reason we're here today. There's another reason as well.
Yeah, the reason for choosing just this Sunday is that it's Munch's birthday, actually. He was born 12th December 1863. So that's the reason for doing this day. And the reason for choosing Madonna as the topic for the day is because you have been the latest years researching the collection of Munch paintings in our collection. And when you examined the Madonna, you did some very interesting finds. So we're going to look into that.
Yeah, and so we're going to basically in the next half an hour or 40 minutes or so, we're going to look at what is she hiding, and we're going to look at the compositional process. We're going to also look a bit at the history and also the motif, know. But maybe we should just start to actually look at the painting itself.
Since we have it here. Yeah. So what do we actually see when we look at Munch's Madonna? It's such a famous painting. So, but I think it's good to start with what do we see? And obviously we see a naked woman, quite young, I think, and the upper body, and she's in some kind of the space around her is not so easy to define, but she's holding her hand, the right hand up behind her head and the left hand behind her back.
Which is also quite awkward in a way.
Yes, it's quite awkward. So it's kind of difficult to decide, is she standing or is she lying down? Or so it's all these questions around her. Even though I think it's Madonna is an image that it's quite easy to grasp immediately. You see what it is. It's obviously this naked young woman. But the more you look at it, the more questions you get. And of course, also when you add the title Madonna, this makes it quite mysterious and the interpretation becomes complex.
And this sort of wavy, very sort of organic, flowing sort of background, that's also sort of...
Yeah, that's also something that is... I mean, the figure is quite naturalistic rendered, but this space around her, it's often referred to as some kind of aura or... Yeah, and also waves is the association that people get, that she's kind of floating in an atmosphere or some water. And you also had this red halo, which is an interesting element in the composition.
Yeah, which is quite dominant, yeah.
Yeah.
And then also, these lines here and...
And there is also some here, you can see all this, these waving lines, but you also have some, I think what's referring to what we're going to talk about today is these... If you look close here at this part, you can see these lines here.
Yeah, so there's something going on here, and yes. And this is something that that we really recently discovered some sort of very interesting information concerning the actual sort of compositional process of this painting, and this was using a technique called infrared.
Yes, and we're going to come back to all these questions about the interpretation and the title and these things around the image. But I think it would be nice if you maybe first took us into these findings that you have done.
Okay, I'll try and do that.
Yeah.
So, basically we used together with the photographer or the photographic department at the National Museum, we used, it's a straightforward and it's a routine examination of paintings called infrared technology. And this allowed us to make a really quite an interesting discovery concerning this painting. And basically, I'll try and sort of explain it, but basically, well, we have it here. We have some nice bottles of pigments which represent the colours of the rainbow. So if you imagine that, that's the visible light. That's what you see with your eyes. And the infrared is that region which is just beyond the red. And it's a region that we can use. We can use that energy to look at paintings, for example, and we use it to penetrate through the paint layers. And then that might give us some indication of what's lying underneath.
So what's the infrared? What is it? Can you explain a little bit?
Yeah, so it's basic
the technique of the infrared reflection.
So we're trying to capture everything that's in the infrared range, which is beyond the red, beyond what you can see with your eyes, and we're trying to capture that on camera. And that's when we have like, you can make your own camera, but we use a specialist camera here that scans, and basically we just light the painting with 2 normal incandescent lights, and the light goes in and it penetrates through the layers of the painting. And if you're painting on a blank canvas, you would always have a white canvas, so the light there will be reflected back. But if there's anything that's like carbon rich, like something that's made of carbon, so like charcoal or pencil or something, like drawing underneath, that will be absorbed by the light, and that information will be recorded back to the camera. So all this visible light that we're getting back, the reason you see the red is because all the other colors are absorbed and you're just getting the reflection of the red back. But here we want the infrared, what you can't see. So we filter all of that out and we only get that image. And that can give us some very interesting information, which in this case was, and this is what is often used for, it's a routine examination actually, to look at underdrawings to see if an artist has had a preliminary drawing or alterations in his or her work. And
so what did you find when you used this technique on the Madonna painting?
So that's a good question, because we were actually with Höstland, the photographer. This was just like a routine examination of a lot of the Munch paintings before we were moving them over, and also in connection with the new catalogue and all those sorts of things. And we found a very interesting underdrawing. Yeah. Which I will... So what I've done now is that we've had this printed up, so it will be a light 1-to-1. So here it comes. So here we have a 1-to-1 printout of what you would see the infrared. So basically, the camera is picking up what's lying underneath, and this tells us about the way Munch has thought before he's actually put paint on the canvas. So he's sketched out, and pay close attention here, he's really sort of changed the composition here.
So that's why we pointed at this.
And actually, you can see this very well in infrared, but if you look very closely, you can. Should really put a protective glove on just in case. But if you look very closely here, if we can zoom in here, you can actually just make out where the original, or not the original, but the first sort of impression or the first idea of the arm, her arm should have been hanging down. It also shows, for example, you might be wondering what this is up here. These are just old restorations, so it shows other things. It's showing predominantly the sketching, but there are certain pigments that it doesn't manage to, that will also react and
but the hollow, it's white, so why is that?
That's to do with the pigment, the red paint, I think, But predominantly we're looking at these underdrawings, and this is what gives us a lot of information. So,
Yeah. Yes, and this is interesting because we can use this in. I think we should maybe start out and tell about the different versions of Madonna.
Yeah, because there's not just this version.
Yeah, so to just talk a little bit about how we can use this information in the further research on the painting. Because I think for many, at least for the Norwegian public, it's quite well known that there is a version of Madonna both in the Munch Museum and this one in the National Museum. There is actually 5 different versions of the same motive. And so you will see now here on the screen, you see first you have this image with the Munch Museum's version, and you have then the one that is in the Hamburger Kunsthalle in Germany. And on the next image you will see 2 other versions that are in 2 different private collections. So you altogether have 5 painted versions. They are quite similar, as you can see, but the colors differs a little bit, and also a little bit the painting technique, but the figure is always the same.
But our one and the Munch Museums, they're sort of quite similar.
Yeah, they are very similar.
Yeah.
It seems they are very more kind of processed or finished in a way. The other 3 look more spontaneous, and they have also differ quite much in color. So that's interesting. I think we can talk a little bit more about that later on, maybe. But what's referring to this infrared image and how we can use it? It's about we can use it in getting a more sure date of the painting, because the thing is that Munch didn't date any of these 5 versions. So he did sign.
Yeah. So we have the signature here, which you should be getting a nice close-up of.
Yeah. So all the 5 versions are signed, but not dated.
Right.
But referring to when we look into exhibition history and other letters, written things, then out from that kind of material, we know that for quite for sure that they were made between 1894 and 1897, all of them.
So the chronology is difficult, or has been
kind
difficult to establish.
It has. So the interesting thing now is that because we have this underdrawing, it's very likely that this is the first one. So that's the important thing with this ERR examination, I think, one of the important things.
But there's what was interesting about this, and like what I showed you before, that we could actually see when you know after you've seen the infrared, it's actually quite easy to see where his sort of first sort of drawings were. And an art historian had already noted this in the 1980s, I think. If I'm correct.
Yeah. It's American Munch scholar Reinhold Heller. He already in 1984 he pointed out this, that it looked very much like underdrawings. And he also had this theory that the painting was already finished in 1893, and that was then he was referring to some sketches. I think you can see that on the screen here now. 2 sketches. There is one sketch of a model from 1893. That one is actually signed and dated. I put a little red circle around the signature and the date, so maybe you see that up in the corner. It's not so easy to see, but anyhow. And you also have the other one on the right side, which is it's a sketch belonging to the Munch Museum, and that is dated 1893-94, so slightly before the painting. So based on this, and also there is another third sketch, which is in the Munch Museum, the face of Madonna, which should be coming up on the next image here. There you can see it. It's from 1894.
This is a charcoal.
Yeah, this is a charcoal thing. So I think.
So I was going to. So things like charcoal, they're carbon rich, so they would have. That would be something that if he had used that as an underdrawing, that's why you see it.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was a
digression. That's totally fine. And we can see from this face, you can see it's obviously the same model. And the face is almost the same as in the painting, but it's in the painting he has turned her more frontal. And you also have more of the figure, of course, in the painting than you have in this sketch. But based on these sketches and other sources, we think it's likely that it was not finished before 1894. So that's the date that we now have on our version of the motif.
Yeah.
So yeah, but I mean this from already in 1984, Heller had this hypothesis. So one could then ask why haven't this been researched before?
Yeah.
As you said, infrared is a routine
Yes, good
thing.
question. Oops,
Yeah.
No, I mean it's a very good question, but I think like I said, it's a routine investigation. Infrared, they started. I think the first photographs they took in infrared of paintings were 1910, and then by the 1960s it was quite an established technique. We've had sort of older versions of the camera, but why we've never used it on Madonna? We've used it on other paintings. I don't know why. I guess it's because actually she's been hanging in the Munch room most of the time, and I think so a lot of these paintings, you know, because we want them to be accessible to you.
Yeah.
That's why it hadn't been checked out, I guess. But and also maybe paintings tend to be researched when they go perhaps on loan or there's a problem with them in terms of conservation terms, but or it's part of a larger research project. And I think this is just combines with us moving. There's a new Munch catalogue coming out next year, and it was a sort of a general sort of, we were going through the whole collection. So it's an exciting find. Yeah,
Absolutely.
that answers your question.
Yes,
So,
it does. Yeah.
So we were very happy, but we could have found it before. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
But you mentioned that this gives a new argument for the dating in a way, and that's. But what about the sort of in terms of as an art historian? How does that sort of what does that give us then in that sense? Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, first the reason for giving this or saying that this is now the first version is that because we know that there was a sketch with under the paint here. So then we saw these other sketches, and then he continued to sketch on the canvas. And after that, during the process, he changed the position of the arm. So that's very important. Because then after that, it seems like then he was very satisfied with that, the figure as it was with one arm up and one arm down. Because he then repeated that in 4 more painting and also in his etching that he made in 1895.
Yeah.
So I think that's the argument for saying that this is the first one, because in the other one, as far as we know, there is no underdrawing. So then he was still, when he, as we saw on this sketch from the Munch Museum, where you had this on the cardboard, where you have one arm up and one down. So then he had this, and then he started out here with 2 arms down, and then during the painting process, he switched. So I think that's a good argument.
So it's to do with the
the process, and that tells
us
us in a way that he still was in process, and I think that then he saw this and then he was satisfied with this is a well composition. I like it, and yes, so then he continued with the same. He didn't then take the arm down in the next painting, for instance.
And he's working. At least I feel that his work is very spontaneous. It's very much. Because infrared drawings are often, especially with a lot of old master paintings, where paintings have been very much planned. But this, I think, is more like a guidelines. It's more sort of he wants to get correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
But getting a thought process down and then makes the changes as he's actually painting.
Yes. The process is very important.
Yeah.
And I think actually we have on, if we have there we have the image of the lithograph as well. As I said, that was made the year after, 1895. And you see it's the same position of the figure, and you also have these wavy lines around the figure. So maybe we could take a little closer look at also the more the sketches, if we can come back to this. This sketch from 1893 on the next image, you can see that again. because I think it's interesting to see how he worked. And then we know that this was from 1893. And this is the sketch belonging to the Guggenheim Museum in New York. And we can see here that it's a model. She's dressed, and it seems like she's lying down on some bed or something, and she holds her arms down. And it's quite different from the Madonna, but even it's some similarities as well. And then you have the next sketch that we have already seen, this one, which I think comes very close when it comes to the composition. And if you look close at this drawing, you can also see the halo.
The halo.
The halo behind her head. But the difference here is that it's the right hand is down and the left hand is up, and she's turning her face to the side. But otherwise, you have all the elements in this sketch that you have also in the painting, and actually you also have this. It seems like this sperm things, but this is difficult to know if this was an intention from Munch, because it looks like it's water that has been dripping, but it's maybe that he experimented. I mean, as you said, he experimented a lot with techniques and the expression. So, but I've been thinking that it might have been this cardboard that we now look at. It's quite big. And it could have been that he was thinking when he started out with that this should be his Madonna painting, that it should be his paint. As we know, the Scream also is painted on a cardboard. Yeah. But we don't know. But it could be a start for a painting, and then he was not satisfied and then continued on this final version. Yeah. And we also have this last sketch that we also have seen already. This is the face of the Madonna from 1894. This is a charcoal. And I think here we come, as I said, very close to the face and the model. But we do not know today who was the model, but I don't think that's so important actually for the Madonna painting, because it's such a symbolic image actually.
Yeah, okay, so there's no theories about who it might be?
It is some theories, but we don't know.
For sure?
Yeah, we're not for sure.
That's
the name.
Yeah.
So as you can see also here in this sketch is still this not so frontal. That's kind of interesting with this frontal position. That is also what we know from the Scream, that he also did a lot of sketches and tried out the guy in profile, and he was wearing a hat, so it was more naturalistic, realistic rendered. But then he turned the figure very frontal, so that's an interesting thing.
Do you think that makes, sorry, interrupting, but do you think that engages more the viewer?
Yeah, I think that's a very important thing with many of Munch's paintings, that he's so communicative. He wants to communicate, and that the onlooker have a kind of direct communication with the figure. So that's, we can see that in many of his paintings. And there is also, I forgot, there's also the next image shows the etching. So he both had the Madonna in 5 painted versions, and then you have the lithograph, and then you also had the etching, and that was actually before the lithograph. That was was made in 1894. And here you can see there are 2 embryos on the left side of the Madonna, and you also have some sperm cells floating around her in these wavy lines, very much integrated. But I think this figure looks quite different from the painting, but it has the title Madonna, and it's some similarities. So this was obviously a topic that he worked a lot with in the middle of the 1890s. That's for sure.
And but do you think also that there are many versions and in different mediums? Do you think there was any commercial sort of interest in that? No, he was just
for the graphic versions, he sold a lot of them, so it was very popular. He made a lot of graphic. The lithography was sold in, and also there are many versions still in the Munch Museum. So he made a lot of them, and some were hand colored, some were black and white, some were so it's different without the frame and with the frame and so on. But maybe we could elaborate a little bit. We have touched upon a little bit the process of Edvard Munch and how he was painting, and all the techniques. So maybe you could say a little bit more about his processes.
Yeah, no, I mean, especially, I mean, for me, I mean, I think in the 1890s or 1880s, 1890s, Munch is a very experimental painter, and that's what makes him so interesting. And I think that's what's so fantastic about the collection that we have here, is that we have a lot of these earlier works, and I think that we can see that, you know, with the sick child, and but also what I think is interesting with this painting here, if you is the fact that it's very fluid, it's very direct, it's spontaneous. He uses, like I said, mentioned before, this through the infrared we've managed to get this underdrawing. So he's got some kind of idea that, but then he changes, and I think that's what's so interesting. And then if we see now, we have an X-ray of this region up here, and if you look on your screens now, you'll see the X-ray to the left and then the infrared image to the right, and you see an X-ray is something different to infrared, so it's the other end of the spectrum, and this allows you to penetrate right through the painting, so you really sort of see the sort of skeleton in terms of the painting. And the reason you see the white arm, right arm, that's in a very awkward position. In white is because it's the type of paint that he's used. So there's no underdrawing. He's gone straight from drawing out a sketch to then painting quite directly, fluid, very sort of fluid motion, and then changed it as he's painting. There is no underdrawing for this arm, and that I find quite interesting.
Yeah. No, it seems like the face is quite defined on the underdrawing, as you can see it for the public. They can see it now on the screen, I think. But when it comes to the arms and also the hair, he's changed a little bit from the sketch and to what he ended up with. No, I think it's really fascinating to just imagine him painting this figure, and then suddenly, then he kind of came back to the sketch that we already saw from this charcoal on the cardboard. So where we had tried out this kind of weird position with one arm up and one down.
Yeah, because it is a very strange position.
It is.
I was just thinking, you play tennis, isn't it? That's like a smash. It's a very strange,
That's a good point.
very awkward. Sorry, I had to get that one in. But what I forgot to say, this painting is also on canvas. So unlike the Scream, it's not on cardboard. So it's like it's on a traditional canvas support. It's also on a pre-primed support. So he would have bought this. You know, prepared and then painted directly with oil colours.
Yeah.
But as you can see in the top left-hand area here, you can see there's like sort of like almost as if the paint is dissolved, and that's also interesting with Munch's technique, that sometimes he sort of dilutes his paints out. He uses them also straight from the tube. We have a nice little sort of very difficult to see, but there's a sort of impasto detail here. In the green colours, but also in the background, it's sort of watered out or sort of diluted out with probably turpentine.
Yeah. And the halo also have quite a thick layer of paint. It seems like, so
yes,
it's not
yeah.
opaque.
So and that would have been it's a pigment that is a red pigment called vermilion that we have here. So we have tried to put out some of the pigments that we know are in the painting.
Yeah. Well, I think in the next image we get on the screen here now, it should be an image with the 5 painted versions all together. Yeah, there we have it. So here we can see them all together, and that they look quite the same, but as we have already pointed out, that there are also differences. And as I think you mentioned already that the Munch Museum and the National Museum's paintings, they are quite similar. But
yeah, to me they look. I mean, I've seen obviously the Munch Museum's one. I've seen also the one in Hamburg, but I haven't had the opportunity to see the other two, which are in private ownership.
Yeah.
But those two, which appear to be the earliest ones, they seem quite similar in terms of technique. Yeah.
But it's also like in some of these, the two that, especially the one that are in the private collection, he has used some kind of spray technique. I don't think, as far as I have understood, that he used this on this painting, but was that something that Munch used from time to time?
Yeah, there are some. There's a few paintings that have this kind of like a spray sort of splatter technique, and we have actually a very good example of it. We have his self-portrait with cigarette, fantastic painting from 1895. Probably my favourite painting, if I'm allowed to say that. But it's an amazing painting, and that actually has this. You're probably difficult to see on the screen, so you have to come and see it in June next year.
Yeah.
But that has that kind of sort of spray sort of effect, which we find also in the Munch Museum's version.
Yeah.
They have it, but in this one we don't have it.
Yeah.
But again, it just shows how you sort of, he's experimenting. He's using different techniques, I think that's what makes him such a great artist, in my books anyway.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it was talking about these different versions. It was kind of typical for Munch also to make different versions of his motif. As it's quite, I guess many people know that there are several versions of the Scream. And the same with the Sixth Child, which is also a very kind of one of the most famous motifs he made, and also Night in St. Claude, and there are also several. And I think he had different reasons for making this different.
What do you think they were? So why? Or it depends the motif. Or
no, I think firstly it was probably. I mean, he did several versions because some motifs became popular, so then it was a way to sell and earn money. And secondly, he to have several versions of same motif made him more flexible when it come to exhibiting. In the 1890s, he exhibited widely, so it was useful to have. Maybe that's also.
Yeah.
I mean, if a motif was bought by a private owner, then you didn't have to ask for lending it for an exhibition and so on. But I think thirdly, the most obviously and most important thing maybe is that he wanted to experiment, as we have been talking about. That he wanted to try out brushstrokes, colors, and different effects, and how that influenced the expression of the motif, if it did change anything.
But but if we come back to the position of the arm, I mean, how do you think that sort of changes the effect of the motif? How does that? Or was that there's something that's going on in his other paintings?
I think that's. I think it's very important with this change, and for sure, Munch was very aware of the body language of his figures and how they was presented, and how that communicated feelings and attitudes. And women was a major theme in Munch's paintings in the 1890s. And so I was thinking maybe we could have a little look at some other, just to have some examples of other ways that he used
with
arms, with other arms positioned to communicate. Like, for instance, we now have the Puberty, which is also in our collection, and it's also from the same year as the Madonna, 1894. But it's obviously a very different theme. And here we see this young woman sitting on a bed, and she's kind of trying to hide her body with her arms. So she seems more insecure about her body and maybe her sexuality as well. And in the next image, we have the Ashes, for instance. Then you have both arms up, and this woman with this red long hair floating over the man sitting there in the corner. So she's more kind of self-confident and and more and looks directly at us. And in the next, we have the woman in 3 stages, which is also from 1894. And here
that one's in Bergen.
Yeah, that's in Kode in Bergen. And there you have 3 different types of women in the same painting, and you have this character in the middle, which can kind of remind us about Madonna, but even more kind of direct erotic expression in that figure. So I think this shows us that he experimented with this, not only the arms, it's also the hair and the color of the hair, and of course other kind of, and here you have the white dress and the black dress, and she's naked, so that tells us a lot. But also the arms and other kind of, expressed something about the state and the feelings of these women. And we also I also brought in this portrait of Oda Krogh made by Christian Krogh, because I think that's also, if we think about the underdrawing and the arms that were down, it might have come to Munch's mind when he was looking at that sketch that maybe it's a little bit too close to Christian Krogh's Oda Krogh painting.
Yeah,
and you know, also this position with arms like this, that was kind of traditional when you painted a portrait, and Munch made several portraits himself of females standing like this. So maybe and I think also if he had continued with these arms down, it also give more the impression, or you become more sure that she's standing. I think like it is now, you are a little bit, is she lying down, or is she standing, or floating, or what's actually going on? And I think also that this position of the arms make the composition more organic in a way.
Yeah, sort of
it's all
rotational in a way. Yeah, but what about the title Madonna? Because it had another title, or
it was "Woman Making Love" is also a title, and that was a title that Munch used during all his life. So sometimes it was Madonna, sometimes it was "The Woman Making Love." So this is, but today this is very established with the Madonna title. So
two very different titles.
Yes, two. But I mean, the woman
Madonna,
making love is very straightforward. It's what do we see? It's a woman making love, and the Madonna makes it, of course, much more complex.
Because it has those religious connotations or significance or underlying. I don't know. I'm just.
Now, of course, it's the Madonna, the Virgin Mary, and we can see now on the screen this. I just picked one example from our own collection here. That this is, I mean, one of the most common images of females in art history back in time, at least if you go back to the Renaissance and Baroque and so on. So this is something he is referring to. And then you have this, the woman making love and the Virgin Mary, Madonna. It's kind of complex, you know, but it's kind of a more, for him it was, I think it was more about this earthly Madonna. This is kind of a celebration of women in general.
So nothing to do with Christmas?
No.
Sorry.
Yeah. But talking about the title, we could also maybe say a little bit about the reception in his own time. And there was this friend Sigbjørn Opsfelder, the author, Norwegian poet and author, Sigbjørn Opsfelder. He was very fascinated with Munch's art, and he wrote an article about, because Munch had an exhibition in 1895 in Christiania, and then he wrote an article about his paintings, and then in this article he mentions Madonna especially. So we have here on the screen now a quote about the Madonna, so maybe you could read that, Thierry, since your English is a little bit better than mine.
Okay. Yes, okay. Here we go. To me, his Madonna picture is the epitome of his art. She is the Madonna of the earth, the woman who gives birth in pain. I believe one must turn to Russian literature to find a similar religious view of a woman, a comparable glorification of beauty, of pain. It is just such a woman, one who carries in her womb the greatest miracle of the earth, who Munch visualizes. Yeah.
So he then touches on this, the fertility and that we know from the. So he has obviously seen some of the either the lithography or there was also some. In Munch's time, in the beginning, there is a theory that there was a frame around the Madonna painting that was showing these sperm cells and also the embryo So this maybe this why he's referring to this kind of conception and yeah.
But what also puzzles me, and I think that what makes the painting so sort of mysterious in a way, is also this background. Do you have any sort of thoughts on that?
Yeah,
or,
I think many often it's referred to waves and water. And you know, we have now on the screen another lithograph of Munch from 1896. It's called "On the Waves of Love," and this also looks quite. I mean, if you look at the face and the position and the hair, it's similarities to the Madonna. But here you also have a male figure. So then you have the pair. But the point here is the waves. And in Munch's time and also in earlier generation, there was often the mermaid was used as that was kind of a mythological figure referring to a kind of femme fatale. And here we now see Munch also the year before and during the few years before the Madonna painting. He made several mermaid, both drawings and also a painting. I think maybe the painting is a little bit later, but these drawings, the next image also shows a different version of the mermaid. So I think it might be that he has been experimenting with this mermaid motive and mythology around that as well. That he also had that in his head when he was working on Madonna, but then. You know, for Munch it was maybe too much mythology. He wanted it to be the real life here and now. So it's kind of here and now. It's realistic in a way, as I said, but it's also very symbolic, of course. But it's not. The interesting thing is that you can't date in a way when it could have been a woman from today or whatever, you know, because of the surroundings. Surroundings are not detailed, so you can't tell from the
reference.
No, it's no reference with any furnitures or anything. So I think that's and so I think this, but we don't know. It's kind of an open question if it's what kind of space is she in?
But that also makes it. Maybe that's why it's so you can easily identify with this painting, or that's maybe why it's become such an iconic.
Yes,
painting.
I think so.
I don't know,
yeah,
but
no, I think absolutely.
Yeah.
That's absolutely something that's important, and I think also the title is very important here. That has also contributed to this. To the painting become so that it became so famous because Madonna is such a famous motive and it makes this complex interpretation and meaning. Yeah, so but maybe we could look a little bit more into the technique, and I mean, if you have been researching both Scream and Madonna and several of our paintings in our collection, so maybe you could say a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So we have 57 paintings in the collection, or Munch paintings, that is. And I've been looking at them, and what I think is interesting is, one thing is what we've been discussing about Munch's technique, but as a conservator, obviously, I'm also interested in the history of the conservation, because this painting here isn't actually what it would have looked like when it was painted, because it's been through some conservation, and that's kind of interesting in a way as well. But I'll come back to that later. But first, in terms of technique, like we have the screen behind us, I think, in the background here somewhere. Very different paintings, same period. Scream is on cardboard. It's painted with water-based paints, a mixture. It's also some crayon, some oil paint. Doesn't have underdrawing. This painting has an underdrawing. It's on canvas. It's with oils, more traditional. But he's also experimenting with the different paint techniques.
But with the Scream, you have a drawing on the back side.
That you do, yes. So he's that's his preparatory drawing. But what is interesting here is that, like I mentioned, these paintings have been restored over time. Some have, some haven't. Scream hasn't, but this one has. And this one was restored in probably twice when it came into the collection in 1909. So I have a feeling it was varnished. I'll come back to what varnish is. And then it was, again, they went through a heavy restoration in the 1960s. So it still looks good, but it's got this layer of varnish. So this film, it's got 2 layers actually on top, which it wouldn't have had in Munch's day, because Munch wasn't really, he didn't use varnish in that manner. And varnish is basically, I have some here, got my props here. But varnish is basically resin from either trees, plants, or insects. And these were basically then diluted into turpentine or a solvent, so spirit varnishes. And these were used. You would, I think maybe you get a picture on the screen now. These were used to varnish paintings, and it had 2 functions. The one function was to saturate out the colours. The other function was to protect the painting.
Yeah.
But Munch's paintings, he didn't use varnish in that manner. But what we did, I looked at a lot of these paintings, and especially Puberty and Madonna, and we found, especially in this area here, so by the eye, and also I think we might get a zoom around here. You see there's kind of a transparent layer, and this is another layer of varnish. So I think he's using, and these are lying underneath these restoration varnishes, which were applied by restorers such as me. I didn't apply these, but people with the same job. And then this is lying underneath. So I think originally what is interesting about this painting is that certain areas, the background would have been sort of matter, but maybe sort of areas of the figure a little bit more glossy. So again, he's playing with this sort of interplay of matte and glossy.
Yeah, you see it especially here in the hair, I think.
And then, so that was one of the interesting finds that we uncovered with Madonna, and also with Puberty. We also found in the figure, we found up to 3 or 4 layers of varnish just in the figure itself. But I mean, they still look very much, the same, but I think it's also important sometimes to realize that they have changed over time, and obviously they've, some of the colors might have faded slightly.
The general condition of the painting is quite good.
It's very good, yeah.
That's most of his painting, as far as I know, is in our collection is in a good condition. So
yes, ironically, the Scream is the most delicate.
Yeah, but that's on cardboard, isn't that so?
Yeah. But no, the other paintings and the sick child also is quite fragile. But no, but they are in a stable condition.
Yeah.
But maybe, does that answer your question?
Yes.
Sort of.
Yeah.
But I've got a question for you actually, because I've always wondered, well, what was the reception back in the 1890s? I mean, this is quite a sort of, also the title and the motif is quite, it would have caused quite a stir, or.
Yeah, when it comes to he had the reception was different from place to place, and that depends on where he showed it. Was it in Berlin or in Christiania or wherever? But if we go to Christiania, he exhibited Madonna painting in 1895 at Blomqvist in Christiania, and then he got quite a lot of negative critiques, and people was making fun of his paintings, and it was too radical in a way for the milieu in Christiania. And up until then, in Norwegian art history, there hadn't been so many naked female figures, actually. There were more landscapes and historical painting, but I mean, if you go to European art, and there's a lot of, so then in that setting, it's not so provocative in a way. So you can see now, this is a caricature that we're showing you from that was made in a caricature magazine in connection with this exhibition that I mentioned at Blomqvist. So here you can see the Madonna image And there you also have the sperm cells and the embryo on the side of the painting. And there is also the next image shows that's from another magazine, but also from related to the same exhibition. There is also a Madonna figure. So this was kind of there was mocking him in a way, but there was the split. So there was also, as we saw, for instance, Sigbjørn Obstfelder, Henrik Ibsen. He also got a lot of support, and so he also got a lot of positive response.
So he was
so it's kind of
acknowledged,
he was absolutely acknowledged.
Yeah.
So that was. And the National Gallery bought paintings, and so absolutely. But it was also, yeah.
But this is also what's interesting about this painting is it's also part of a series, isn't that right? Part of his.
Yeah, it's part of his Freeze of Life. So we have this image here now that from one of his one of his early showings of his Freeze of Life. And there we can see that was in Leipzig in I think it's 1903. And you can see the Madonna in the corner, just right beside the ashes. So Madonna was important for every time. I mean, the Freeze of Life was never settled like this is the paintings that belongs to Freeze of Life. I think we don't have the time to go in detail into Freeze of Life, but it's Madonna was always part of the Freeze of Life series, so it's very important for this. But I think also when we look at this image, it's interesting to see the framing. It's he made this frieze, and that's quite radical. We made a reconstruction of that in the Jubilee exhibition in 2013.
Oh yes,
so that was interesting to see. But I think the last topic we was talking about was to talk about was this framing also in our museum now. Can you say something about the frames and the history?
Well, the painting came in 1909, and we've looked through old photographs, and we've seen that it had another frame before the frame that it has today. Now it's unframed, so you can see that in the image. And we're quite lucky because we have one of the first sort of photographs from 1909 where it shows you the way that the director hung his paintings. And then we see that was changed later on when the Scream came in 1910, and they both got the same type of frames. And I think that Jens Thies, the first director, he was wanting to get these paintings up to sort of to be acknowledged as he was promoting Munch. Like you said, he was recognized by this group of wealthy patrons and also the director, and they were trying to bring him up, and by giving him these sort of very sort of gaudy and well, what we might find quite bling frames, but at the time they were very much that was the sort of style, and
that was I think
the museum frame.
Thies called it exactly that. It's you need some museum frames on your paintings. So then he ordered these heavy golden frames. Even though, as I think, when you see photographs from exhibitions in Munch's lifetime, it's not always these golden frames, but he accepted this in the National Gallery. So
so he was quite happy to get his recognition there. But what you mentioned before, you were mentioning that there was sort of in some of the there was some sort of small details of an embryo or sperm, and that's. You had some sort of theories about
there is a theory, as we saw in these caricature drawings. There were this around, that was the paintings that was showed in that exhibition. Yeah, we have the image here now. So the theory is that there was a painting, at least one of them, at least one of the Madonna painting had this frame, wooden frame with the sperm and maybe also the embryo. But we don't know today. But what we know from the lithograph is that you have we have that also as on the screen now. So there you have the same. So he brought that back into the lithograph.
So that's kind of interesting as well, because it shows that the way we're looking at the painting today, the way it's framed, that's very much we're looking at a painting that's framed in a sort of institutional way, but That's I find that very interesting. What you've been mentioning that there was probably there was a thought process with the frame maybe before, and obviously we won't know, but it's really interesting.
Yeah, I think, and for many of artists in Munch's generation, the symbolists, they were very much occupied with the frames and the wholeness of the painting, and the total work of art and so on and so forth. So just a little at the end there, just comment more on the graphic version. He also made this, as I said, this lithography. He made the first one the stone was made in 1895, and after that he made a lot of different versions, also in color. I think we have also one image here showing 2 different versions. Then you can see he experimented with taking away the frame. So he just put something over when he did the printing, so that you didn't get the frame with it. And the one to the left here is a hand-colored version of the lithograph. And you have also, he experimented a lot, and it's sold in his lifetime. It's sold. The Madonna was very popular. So referring to this discussion that we had about. How was it? How was the reception? I mean, it's quite popular. From the selling of the graphics, we can see that this was very popular, even though he got some critique as well. So yeah.
But I think we've covered what we were gonna. Or did you have anything more?
No, I think we have covered many topics. It's a lot to say about this painting.
No, so I really hope you've enjoyed. This sort of very short journey that we've had. We've tried to sort of take you a little bit closer. We've shown you the painting unframed, but you can come and see it framed, and I hope you will, well, you have to come in June, opening June the 11th next year, where you'll be able to see the Madonna in her full glory in the new Munch room. Or the recreation of the Munch room.
Yeah.
Yes. And I think we have some time for some questions.
Yes. There's a lot of discussion going on about what we see in the title, but I think we'll start with where you ended. And Daniel from Slovakia is asking about why he made so many versions of his paintings. Do you know anything about that?
We talked a little bit about it. That I think one thing is that he when it was a popular motif, it was of course a way of selling. If he sold one copy to a private person, for instance, then he made several versions so that he could exhibit because he was satisfied with this motif. I found it interesting. So that's one, and then it's also, of course, this experimental way of working that we have also been talking about. That he wanted to see this motif. How does it function if I put in more green or red, or if I use this brush or this brush? And so he was experimenting a lot, and I think that's important.
Thank you. Dimi is asking if we know anything about the psychological state of mind that Munch was in at this time. How's his head?
Oh, that was a difficult question, I think.
Very good question.
Yeah, very good question. But I know that there's a biography about Munch on its way. I don't know when it will be published, but I think it's quite soon. But I mean, it's so much. It's a lot to say about Munch and the biography.
Yeah. I think Sam is asking about the red part over her head, and if it's supposed to be a halo or if it's supposed to be a hat, like a beret.
Yeah. As I said, I was referring to this Oda Krog, the portrait made by Christian Krog. It might be that he was thinking, had this painting in his head, I don't know, but it's some other people has also pointed out that it looks a little bit like a hat. But
yeah,
I think
actually. It does a bit look like a hat.
Yeah.
But it's a good question.
Yeah,
it's difficult to know.
But I think if we think about the sketch that we saw with this bigger hollow, that you saw that he was thinking about that quite early. So I look upon it as a halo.
Halo.
Yeah.
Halo, yes.
Thank you. Andy is wondering if this could be Dagny Juel.
Yeah, that has also been discussed, that it might be her, but I don't think so. It's that's not probable, actually. So it's probably a model he used that we don't know the name of.
Perfect. Then I think we'll do the last question. There's a lot of people that have noted that there's a version of The Scream hanging in the background today.
Oh, is there? Yeah. Oh.
So how do you think they compare in regards to being controversial? Is Madonna maybe more controversial today? Like Facebook keeps deleting our photos of Madonna when we put them up.
Yeah, that's a good question actually, because I
don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe it is, but I think that in its time, The Scream was more radical.
Yeah.
It's very, very radical and very different from all other.
But what about today? Maybe
Yes,
The Scream's more accepted, and
yeah, but I think both of them are quite accepted today as well. So.
But that was also interesting what you mentioned before, actually, about that they both, are sort of painted sort of, front looking, face out. So maybe that has something to do with also their connection with. I don't know. I'm guessing.
Thank you all for watching. This was the last episode of Close Encounters this year, and we'll hopefully be back next year with a new season of this series. And we will also have an episode tomorrow of a new series in Norwegian called Dypdykk, where there will be a talk about St. Lucy. It's St. Lucy's Day tomorrow. We wish you all a good evening and a happy Christmas.